Hello, I'm Rich Herring. I never listen to Nerdology because I am way too cool. But carry on listening, nerds.
Hi, this is Mark, and welcome to Nerdology. And today's special guests are, in no particular order, Iain Martin. Hello, Iain.
Good evening.
And Mr. Simon Brett. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
And last but not least, Hayden Gribble. Hello, Hayden.
Delighted to meet you, dear boy.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you all for agreeing to come on. Hayden came up with the idea, so I'm not going to try and nab it for myself.
This was a group effort. This was a group effort.
It was, but it was your idea, so I'm going to give you full credit for it. Hayden, being a creative type, thought it would be quite nice to do a little chat about the writing process and writing in general. And Iain and Simon have both dabbled a bit, haven't you?
I would, a fair amount, I would say.
I'd say a bit in my case, but yes.
So we thought we'd just have a little informal chat and see if something vaguely interesting came out of it.
You never know.
Well, yeah, hopefully.
We may surprise you, listeners. We may surprise you. I like the way. Sorry, before you start, Mark. I like the way that you downgraded it from a joint effort to just me, as though it will be me to blame if the listeners.
Well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? If it all goes swimmingly, you come out looking like a hero. If it all goes horribly wrong, then we know who to blame.
Well, it's the part I was born to play.
I suppose we should start before we do anything else, because we're recording on the 6th of September, and since the last time we put out a show, very sadly, the news has come along that Terrance Dicks has passed away. He was the former script editor of Doctor Who in the 70s, and for a lot of guys our age, he was synonymous with the Target Doctor Who novels. So I suppose we ought to cover that really before we do anything else. I'll come to Simon first. Do you have a particular favourite of his Target books?
If you're talking about the actual content of the book, I don't think I could pick any one in particular. I mean, I've got very fond memories of Dalek Invasion of Earth, because that was probably the first one I read from cover to cover, which was like a hardback edition I borrowed from the library when I lived in Bude in Cornwall. And that was a case of reading that and realising, hang on, I know this story. And then I worked out that I'd obviously watched the Peter Cushing film at some stage. But if I was to pick one particular book, again, it's down to memories, but it's The Five Doctors. Because I remember picking that up and reading that before it even appeared on the TV screen, because it was...
Yeah, that was quite a big deal, wasn't it, back at the time?
It was, and the fact is it's nice and shiny. And I think The Five Doctors in itself, obviously, Terrance was involved in the whole thing. And it's kind of, I mean, obviously, we now live in the age of the Day of the Doctor, where we all go, well, that's probably the most perfect Doctor Who episode ever. And you think, oh my God, that's an absolute miracle that exists. But actually, what Terrance Dicks did with the Five Doctors and managed to give them all a fairly hefty chunk of the apple, if you see what I mean. I think it's still... It's a load of fun. I mean, I don't think it could have been any more than what it was, and I just think he did a really, really great job. And as I understand it, he did it quite quickly. Is that right?
Well, from what I gather, Robert Holmes was initially penciled in to do it, and he just really struggled with it and just said, I can't do this, and it got handed to Terrance Dicks. So if someone of Robert Holmes' stature struggled with it, I think it says a lot about what a professional he was, that he could just turn it around in a relatively short space of time. And it is, I suppose there is always going to be that nostalgia factor, and the fact that it's a multi-Doctor story, you obviously kind of tend to possibly think slightly better of it, but I just think it's a really fun story.
I mean, and I had this kind of, as soon as I saw the Three Doctors on television, I went straight out and found the novelisation of it, so it was always about multi-Doctor things for me. So, but yeah, I mean, in general, just his style of writing. I mean, they were just incredibly absorbing and easy reads. So for kind of a child of that age, I'm thinking I was reading them from about the age of 8 onwards. Yeah. So the very fact that I could easily get through a book, be completely absorbed by it, and get to the other end and not feel hard done by or anything like that, and just completely, and just picking up on the Doctor's adventures. Obviously these are the times before we had VHS and what have you. So we relied on these to know what the stories were, and I just think they're incredibly satisfying and easy reads, and that is in no way putting down his style of writing. I think for children of that age, I think it's important that they can just absorb the books without feeling like it's an effort.
I think that the great strength of him was the clarity and the economy he wrote with, and those books were so accessible, and you could, sit down, you've got an hour to go before Sunday lunch, and you can read The Keeper of Traken or whatever. Everyone's been saying it on Twitter, but he wrote so many of these books in such a short space of time, and he did so much for literacy for a whole generation, because it was, literally all the kids at school would read these books all the time. And, where's the OBE?
Yeah, it's a bit sad that it didn't come along, but I think certainly seeing the outpouring of emotion on social media and hearing lots of podcasts putting out their tributes to him, I think the people that mattered the most, the fans, really appreciated what he did, and I think that's, to someone like him, I would imagine
that's probably more
would
important.
Been...
Yeah. I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hayden, what about yourself?
I've got pissed with him. Can I say that on here, or can I say
yeah.
Yes. Now that was one hell of a moment. The funny thing is that, I mean, you're talking about how much he did for a generation. I'm a little behind you guys, and I would have to say he's done it for more than one generation. Because I know several people of my own age who, whether it be through second-hand shops or local libraries, became engrossed in Doctor Who through the Target novelisations. For me, one very special book sticks out, and that is Doctor Who and the Web of Fear. Now, I mean, back in the late 90s, I was trying to hoover up as much Doctor Who as possible, because I had 26 years
to catch up on,
basically, at that point. So anything I could find was like gold dust, and that gold dust was the Target books. There was, I've spoken about it before on other podcasts, but there was a second-hand bookshop in Holland-on-Sea in Essex, where my grandparents lived. And on a Saturday, my grandfather would walk, it's about a half-mile walk, he'd walk up the hill from their little bungalow, and he'd nip in the bookies opposite, so he'd nip into Ladbrokes, and he would give me his winnings, from the horses. And he only ever used to pay, it was always, like a little jar full of coppers, just the loose change for the week, and then go up on Saturday, put it on a horse, and then he would give me £1, sometimes even £2. And I'd go in this shop, and they had like a Tupperware box on the floor, which was just overflowing with these Target books.
Yeah.
And there were some absolutely fantastic novelizations in there. I remember Genesis of the Daleks was in there. I remember Terror of the Autons was in there. Planet of the Spiders. Doctor Who and the Cybermen.
Knowing you and your jamminess, you've probably got 3 copies of The Wheel in Space.
Hardcover, Mark. Hardcover. I remember stumbling across The Abominable Snowmen in there, which was one of the first ones that he did, and among that first batch of novelizations were among his most detailed. I think the same could possibly be said for the Target range anyway.
Yeah.
And I was fully engrossed in this, and I really loved the sound of the Yeti, and I remember seeing episode 2 on that Troughton Years VHS that was around at the time. Anyway, I went into my school library, and I found the follow-up, The Web of Fear. And that book, I genuinely do not think I would have as much of an interest in writing, as much of an interest in literacy in general, if it hadn't have been for that book. Mm-hmm. There was something about that book which just absolutely grabbed me.
Yeah.
And I just absolutely adored it. I know it isn't the greatest Doctor Who story of all time, but there's just something about the claustrophobia in it and the tight-knitted characterisation of the trio of TARDIS lineup at that point. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Jamie, Zoe, and the Second Doctor. And I loved Patrick Troughton. It was and is still my favourite Doctor. That naughty uncle with the twinkle in his eye, you know, it was just glorious. And I would have to say The Web of Fear every time. I reread it last year and I still had that same childish glee as I pored over the chapters. It's just wonderful. And Ian's right as well. I mean, you can read these things now as an adult in about an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. But I think he had such a special talent for not simplifying, but making a story like that sort of come through time to me. Yeah, so to a boy in the late 1990s reading a book that had been released 20 years prior at that point, and still seeing the magic of it, and still seeing it for what it was, which was a bloody good read. So that was a rather long-handed way of saying that.
I think the beauty of the Target books was that obviously they weren't constricted by the budgets that the TV versions had. So, as you've all mentioned before, you could sort of embellish on characters and flesh them out more, and they would take on a life of their own in the novels that I suppose possibly if you'd read the novel first and then watched the TV version afterwards, you might have felt slightly let down by watching the TV version. But it was just a really neat way to introduce certainly my generation to reading. I can't imagine the number of particularly boys getting boys into reading, just having that outlet.
I have to give a special mention, if I can get my words out, for a past Doctor adventure that he wrote in the late 90s called Players, which is a Sixth Doctor and Perry story, and it's about the Doctor meeting Winston Churchill at a certain point in his life, and then coming back again, just I think a couple of years before World War II breaks out, where there's the threat of Nazi Germany is becoming very real, and there's an exploration of King Edward VIII and his ties to the Nazi regime. And it's sort of a kind of what if. There's like aliens playing at potentially changing the course of history through Winston Churchill. And Churchill was Terence Dicks's hero. I remember he wrote about him once in a Doctor Who magazine. Do you remember the old... I don't buy it anymore, so I don't know whether they still do it. But when you pick the questions out of the TARDIS tin...
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he did that, and that was... that was what he talked about. His main inspiration was Winston Churchill. So it's a wonderful book for us to mention.
Because he wrote one of the very early New Adventures, didn't he? Time Worm.
Yes,
Exodus,
it was. Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was. Oh God, my memory's so terrible. That was World War II, wasn't it?
It was an alternate 30s and 40s where Hitler had won the Second World War and Britain had become part of the Third Reich. And
it's sitting on my bookshelf, but it's been a very long time since I read it.
And it's kind of a sort of indirect sequel to the War Games. The most exciting... so I read Exodus when it came out. I was 15. It was the summer of 91. And the most exciting part of it is where the Seventh Doctor is hanging around with Ace in this sort of Nazi castle somewhere. And some officer assumes that Ace is his, lady piece, and you have this brilliant bit where Sylvester McCoy basically has to go, no, she's nothing to do with me, I like them big and bouncy, which is just such a distressing image. But Exodus would be, I think, probably my choice for Terrance Dick's books, because after that he sort of got a worse and worse brief each time with something like, did anyone read The Eight Doctors? That was the first novel.
Yeah.
I never read that.
Yeah. Oh, don't read that. Please don't read it. No one's life is that long. I mean, it's well written, obviously. It's Terrance Dick's, but the brief he was given was, drop in a little cameo from each of the previous Doctors in this really loose kind of, whatever kind of story. Make up a new companion who's like a generic companion with nothing exciting or interesting about her. And and if you could just set the Sixth Doctor's bit during the end of Trial of a Time Lord and do a sort of parallel bit where it's really confusing, because separate to what's actually happening in Part 13 of Trial of a Time Lord, you've also got the Eighth Doctor turning up and everything. Oh dear Lord, no, just no.
Well, that was a lovely recommendation there, Ian. So we'll all be digging out the Eight Doctors.
Exodus, though, is really good.
Yeah, I remember it being good. It's been a very long time since I read it, but yeah.
Yeah, Simon and I are just deleting the Eight Doctors from our eBay basket now, so thanks for that.
I mean, it could be worse. There were a lot worse books published in that range. But yeah, it didn't begin well.
So what you're saying is 5 Doctors was his limit. Any more than 5 Doctors and things started going wrong.
I mean,
It was a
do we need
tipping
more
point.
than 5? Do we ever need any more than 5 Doctors? But if you did it now, if someone, if you woke up tomorrow and you were the showrunner and they said, right, we want a 5 Doctor special, you can pick any 5 Doctors from the 13 we've had. That would be brilliant.
Oh, which 5 would you choose?
Oh, Matt Smith, Tom Baker, the Valliard, Jodie, and Sylvester.
Now, see, this is an interesting writery question. Is the fact that I think we would all probably tip for Jodie, wouldn't we? Because
It's
can
difference.
Yeah, because I don't know. If you're the same as me, you kind of. I don't feel like they've kind of found everything they can from her, if you see what I mean. I know we've got another series to go, but as a writer, that it's like if somebody says, "Oh, you can pick a Doctor," which Doctor are you going to pick? I usually pick the one I know least about, or the one that I find the most difficult in some respects, because you kind of feel that you've not kind of gleaned what you think they're capable of. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, it does,
So
yeah.
you're a brave writer. You like a challenge. See, I would pick a very easy Doctor to write for, and
Would
then
you?
that part of the story takes care of itself, and then all you've got to worry about is the plot. But you just have the 7th Doctor, and he can just be standing enigmatically in a shadow for 30 pages, and that's marvelous.
I think it's probably just me trying to trick my brain, because if I'm given a problem, then that gets my brain working, and that's where the story comes from.
Well, everyone's got different tricks.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably go for a mixture. I think you'd have to have the current Doctor, because like you said, Simon, there's not much that's been done with her yet, and her story isn't over. And it'd be interesting to see her possibly up against quite a brash Doctor, so possibly Colin Baker, maybe. And then you could have more of a playful Doctor. So I suppose that's where your Matt Smith and your Patrick Troughton would come in, one of those two. And then I suppose you'd possibly need someone to... Oh, God, now it gets difficult. Oh, I don't know. I know what you mean, though, with regards to like in a challenge with writing for a character like Jodie, who isn't fully formed. Maybe that's one of the reasons why last series didn't work for many people. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't want to go down that.
No, yeah. Anyway, back to writing, everyone.
So, Ian,
Hello.
You've talked about your series of novels previously on the show. Would you like to just give a little refresher on your main character, and the sort of the general feel of the novels that you produce?
So back in the day, I started this 5 years ago, when the idea of having an episodic sci-fi adventure series where the main character was a woman was just a whole new idea.
That's just crazy talk,
I had it, and it was my idea, and now the BBC have stolen. No. So there are 7 books in the Winterhill series, and Rebecca Winterhill is a lady who wakes up. It's 500 years from now. She wakes up, she has no idea particularly of who she is, how she got where she is, or any personal memories. And across the 7 books, she just kind of travels around the 12 galaxies mankind has expanded into. She has a number of adventures with a couple of recurring villains or monsters, and there's kind of a big business who are a kind of villain as well. There's a lot of politics, and yeah, she just sort of has really, I think, quite brilliantly written adventures. And
Even if you say so yourself.
Has a lot of cocktails and talks a lot of nonsense, and they were all really good fun.
Well, I've read the first one and enjoyed it immensely, and I got a slight flavour of Douglas Adams coming through. I don't know if that's someone you particularly enjoy, or whether you just have a similar sense of humour.
Very kind of you to mention me in the same sentence as Douglas Adams. He was, so when I was kind of seven or 8, The Hitchhikers was on TV, but I think even before that, my dad had listened to it on the radio and probably taped it off the radio. So it was part of me. I read the books probably before I really was old enough to understand 80% of the jokes in them. But yeah, he was someone who was very much who I grew up with, like Terence Dicks. You know, he didn't write perhaps quite as many books as Terence Dicks, but his voice has always been, I suppose, something that's been in the background. And then other people have said that some of the stuff is a bit Terry Pratchett, which again is incredibly flattering. I mean, not in a fantasy sense, and I don't have anything like Pratchett's amazing warmth or humanism. I am, if anything, quite a misanthropic, bitter and vengeful man. But I don't wear a hat, so swings and roundabouts. Some of the stories I do kind of play more for laughs, and some of them are much more serious, and it all gets a bit earnest and probably a little bit too earnest. I don't know. You can never judge your own work, etc. But yeah.
So do you have a sounding board for when you're in the writing process? Do you have someone you trust who you can sort of send drafts to, who will look it over and sort of give their opinion as you're writing? Or is it very much your personal process, and it doesn't really see the light of day until it's fully formed and out for people to read?
It started out, I would inflict my works in progress on a couple of people who I think after about 3 books of just very polite nods and all that, yes, that's very good, I thought, yeah, you're not really either giving a toss or feeling any particular difference. I guess it's hard,
particularly if they're friends, because obviously
exactly.
They probably don't want to upset you by saying, "Oh, actually, that was pretty dull." Or you know.
Yeah.
But on the other hand,
that was...
you're relying on someone to turn around and just give it a critical eye and say, "Well, that worked, but this could do with tightening up, or just lose that bit, or it's difficult.
I mean, so the kind of breakthrough was I was hanging out at the Literature Festival in Dubai a couple of years ago. I was hanging out with Lauren Oliver, who's an American YA novelist, and she we got talking. We had a lot of cocktails, and she ended up reading the first book as well, and she gave me loads of really good feedback. You know, she was like, I love what you're doing. I like the dialogue. Your plots are, you know, because within each Winterhill book there are like 6 or 7 kind of adventures, and they're all about the same length. And she said sometimes that's absolutely fine and it goes past, you know, really quickly. Other times you don't have enough plot, and your plotting could be a lot tighter, and you have you know, you have like an L-shaped plot when you should have a Y-shaped plot, or, you know, that it was significantly underplotted. So after I spoke to her and we had that exchange, I would put a lot more into the actual stories I was telling, and worry less about giving the characters lots of funny lines or lots of hero moments, and just let that happen more organically within the stories. And then I suppose the last kind of 3 books in the series, I just purely wrote on my own without getting any input or opinion. And I think the general consensus from both people that have read them is that the last couple of books were by far and away the best. So what do I know?
I imagine it, particularly if you're writing a series, I've got no idea because I'm not a creative person like that, but I would think that it sounds like you got that sort of bit of advice and feedback that you were really looking for at a relatively early stage within the series, and it just gives you that bit of confidence to know that you're kind of going in the right direction, and you can kind of go back to that and use that when you're getting to the next part, and you perhaps don't necessarily need that sounding board, but can kind of anticipate where the story is going, and it just kind of flows rather than you having to keep going back and trying to second guess yourself. That bit is kind of in the back of your mind. You don't really need to focus on that. Yeah,
I think so. I think the feedback I got from Lauren happened at exactly the right time, because, you know, the first couple of books you're just kind of, what was the expression? Pantsing it. Thank you, Simon. And, you know, all you're thinking about is, oh my God, can I write a book? Can I write enough words? I don't know what I'm doing. And then by the time you're on your 3rd or 4th book, you know you can do it. You know it's going to work. You can afford to, therefore, try a bit harder with what you're doing. Otherwise, you just write the same book 7 times.
Yeah.
And you should always...
That must be a potential pitfall.
Really, really must be. I mean, there are... I could tell you any number of authors who always just write the same book every year. A lot of them are incredibly rich people, but that's not fair.
It must be hard, because it must be a sort of balancing act, because obviously if you do get praise for what you've done, you know, there's obviously that temptation to go back and you want to sort of recreate that, but you have to be able to take it forward and perhaps give it a new direction. It must be quite a balancing act.
Yeah, but it's the same in any art form, isn't it? If you think about The Edge in U2, you know, yeah, they could try and reinvent their sound every record, or they could just redo exactly the same thing every time. And at the end of the day, if you've got to pay for that many private jets and you need to guarantee an absolute minimum income of $20 million, you need to make sure that your album is going to sell exactly the same number as the last one. And a lot of writers, to be fair, the sort of novelists that produce a genre novel every year, be it a crime novel or a historical fiction novel. They're on such a treadmill in terms of having an idea, writing the book, doing a signing tour for the previous one, doing all the legal stuff. They genuinely don't really have time to think outside the box or second guess themselves. Someone like I don't know. James Patterson's a bad example because he doesn't even write his own books anymore. But, someone like that who just produces 3 or 4 books a year, he doesn't have time to think, how can I make this different? Or what can I do to subvert my own format?
It's like a production line.
Yeah, it's literally, I wake up today, I've got to do 3,500 words, and then I can go and, buy some chips. The great privilege of not being a full-time professional novelist is that, I can think about things more and be like, well, I've written book A. I want to write a book that's more like, book B. I want to try and do this kind of thing. And it doesn't matter if, my readers don't like this one because they know there'll be another one along soon that they might like, but I'm not going to lose, 20 million readers around the world. I'm going to lose 5 guys in Essex.
I mean, Hayden, you've not been afraid to switch up genres, have you? Because you've been quite prolific, haven't you? Over not that long an amount of time.
No, I've actually, there's 5 books that have been published, but I counted up the other day that I've written 7 books in 7 years. I started out in 2012 with a crime thriller idea, which quite honestly only came to me from a really boring edition of Match of the Day. On a Sunday, I was sitting there in bed, I was really bored, I was on my laptop, and I'd been reading quite a lot of sort of spy thriller novels at that time. And I kind of thought to myself, and listeners who have heard me on Podcasters Royale may well know that that I'm a big James Bond fan. And I was always quite struck with The Living Daylights, the Timothy Dalton debut, where he's in that first scene, well, not the first scene, in the first scene of the main film after the cold open, he looks like a man who absolutely resents his job, who absolutely is disgusted in what he's doing. And I wanted to write about that. I wanted to write about an agent, an assassin, who's basically paid to kill people, and that's it, and hates it, and wants to go back to his old life with his wife and just live a quiet existence. So I sort of thought to myself, like Iain was said, you can be quite daunted with the first book, and I just thought, well, I'll just break it down. I'll write 12... I don't think I was that specific, but I ended up writing 12 short stories with a linking narrative that when you sort of sellotaped them together, they formed a novel. There was about 45,000 words, I think, that, and I wrote it in the space of about 4 or 5 months. It took a couple of years to come out, but I went from a crime thriller book, that becoming The Man in the Corner, and I released, I say released, it sounds really pompous, but, I uploaded to Amazon a very modest anthology of my teenage angsty scribblings, which I called Tales from Another Me. And then there was a bit of a break whilst I was writing the first Captain Random book, and also my autobiographical Doctor Who book, The Child Out of Time, growing up with Doctor Who in the Wilderness Years. And yeah, there was quite a lot of genre hopping, I suppose. But I suppose it's trying to find my feet with what I was good at and what I was comfortable with doing, and also hand in hand with trying to push myself and challenge myself at that point as well. And each and every one of them have been an absolute joy to write, I have to say. I mean, I've apart from obviously going back and doing edits, I've never gone back and read them again, because I kind of think once they're finished, then they're sort of out there. They're not really mine anymore. They're,
I can imagine you've invested so much of your time into writing them that you've kind of lived the book.
Yeah,
so,
well,
like you say, once it's done, it's out there, and that's it. You move on.
Yeah, especially with Child Out of Time, I had literally lived that book. So it was old news to me by then. But I suppose from conception to the book actually coming out, I think the average time frame has been about 2 years. And that could be the book taking anything from sort of 9 to 12 months to write, and then there being a sort of 3 to 4 month period where I put it to one side and forget about it for a little while. And then I'll do something else. I might start another book, or there might be something else going on with at a different stage. And then I'll come back to it with fresh eyes, which is when I will then attack it for the second or third draft. And then at that point, that's when I send it off to my proofreader. I am a self-published author, but I have a small group of people who basically help me out. So I have 2 proofreaders. I'll give it to one. They'll have a look at it. They'll send it back. I'll make those amends, and then I'll send it off to somebody else just in case there's something that both myself and that other proofreader has missed.
Yeah.
And then I've got a cover artist. In the case of the Captain Random books, is the brilliant Anthony Morin, or Weird Bean, on Facebook and Twitter. Hey, mate. And then there'll be a cover designer who I'll use through Fiverr, just to bring all of Anthony's brilliant work together, and put it into the spine and the back and the front cover, and then upload it to the publisher, and then do it that way. And I am someone who I'm not sure. I have to admit I'm not that clued up on your background, Iain, when it comes to your books and how you got them out there. But I understand that you do working publishing, yes?
I do, yes.
Yeah,
but I self-publish most of my stuff because I work in the publishing industry. I know what it's really like, and yeah, it's not really a world I'd want to be part of. No,
I've had 2 books with 2 fairly small publishers. There was a local one to me who picked up a Dad's Army book that I wrote, and this was this was all a part of the learning process, but incredibly painful at the time. I spent a couple of years writing this Dad's Army handbook. So it was an episode guide on all the episodes, little bits about the actors and trivia and what have you. And I think at the end of the first draft, it was about 120,000 words. And I'd spent, I was 23, I reckon, when I started writing this. So I was still living at home. So I felt like I could afford to maybe take a day off work a week. So I dropped hours, essentially, to finish this book. And when I delivered it, I've been sending it chapter by chapter to the publishers. When I delivered it, and I finally said, "Yeah, here it is. Let me know what you think." They got back to me and said, "Oh, this isn't what we wanted at all." And so I thought, well, what have you been reading over the last 2 years?
I was going to say, you've been delivering this piecemeal.
Bit by bit.
Oh, absolutely.
You'd think they come back to you fairly sharp.
Yeah. And it then also transpired that there wasn't a proofreader per se. I would have to edit my own work, which I think is the worst way to go about things, because even if I look at the word "the" and I've spelt it "te," I'm still going to think that's the greatest word I've ever written, because it's my work. It's, I'm not saying...
And your own eyes are not going to pick up on typos like that. You can't do it. I mean, we've all written a lot of things, and we've edited them and edited them and edited them, but you're always going to miss 2 or 3 on a page. Absolutely. And it's terrible that you were in that position where you've got to do all your own editing. But I'm absolutely fascinated by the idea that you were sending them chapters as and when they were written.
Yeah.
And only at the very end of that did they turn round to you and say, "Oh no, we don't want this." It's like, well, that's shocking. I mean, it's not shocking, because I know it happens a hell of a lot, but it's so divorced from the kind of myth I had of what it would be to be a writer when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, we're all growing up thinking that we still live in the 70s and you can be Martin Amis and ponce around in your velvet smoking jacket, tossing off a couple of pages a day, and there's a whole team of people who will be checking everything and typesetting it and all this and that.
Yeah.
And writers now have to do so much. And a very good friend of mine was in a very similar thing. She had written a book that was set in World War II. And it was a kid's book set in World War II, had say 3 characters in it. And every step of the way, the publishers were saying to her, this is really good. We loved your latest chapter. This is great. This is going to be the best thing ever. And she finished it and they said, right, what we probably say to you is, could you actually set it in World War One and have 5 characters in it?
Oh,
so
Lord.
her second draft was a page 1 rewrite, which... So it does happen a lot, but it must have been, really, it must have really knocked the wind out of your sails at that point.
Must be so demoralising.
It was, but it was a lesson in the way that the business could be. So I think from there on in, I mean, I did, funny enough, Child Out of Time was with another publisher, and then there was another lesson there, which was, if you're not a name, you're not going to get anywhere, essentially. I was...
But how do you become?
Well, exactly. There was a publisher who were prioritising celebrities, and I will do bunny quotations here. I mean, most of them seem to be actors from the 1980s who haven't done anything in 20 years, that kind of thing. But anyway, and I delivered my book, and after a year, I hadn't heard anything, and I thought, what's going on here? There's other books that they were putting out, which I completely understand, but they then owned up to prioritising others over mine because they basically wanted a name to set up their company. And I said, right, well, give it back. Give it back here. I'll do it myself. And I released it. And, I mean, they were big learning curves. Big learning curves. And I mean, I'm not saying I've got a complete distrust for the industry, but what I'm saying is I like the autonomy I have over my own work. And I like the fact that I can release it on my own steam, essentially, and basically not be mucked around.
There's 2 sides to it. There is that, yes, you're the master of your own work, and you're not being mucked around, and you're not going to be frustrated. But also, you've got so much more freedom to do what we do.
Yeah.
And, there are an awful lot of, professional and very famous novelists who regularly say to their publishers, I don't want to do volume 12 of this crime series. I want to do a historical novel, or I want to do a romantic comedy. And they're like, yeah, we're only going to publish volume 13 of your rather limiting crime series. So some of these big names are on as much of a treadmill as as anyone. So at every level of success, from the look at J.K. Rowling, she couldn't do anything with Casual Vacancy until she'd finished Potter, and I think she probably would have benefited hugely from breaking it up a little bit and trying the Cormorant Strike books as well. But I think Bloomsbury just had a nailed to a desk churning out Potter until it was done. Sorry, I've rambled on, and I really want to hear...
Me too. I'm so sorry, Simon.
I don't know if Simon's still there, or if he's maybe gone down the pub or something. But I'd love to hear about Simon's writing.
Simon, what have your experiences been? Because you've got the added thing because you're particularly gifted. You are also a very talented artist as well. So you've got that extra dimension when you're involved in projects, haven't you?
Well, that's very nice of you to say, but the disadvantage is because I'm chipping away, because I do a bit of music as well, and I do like bits of radio and what have you. So I'm chipping away at lots of mountains, which means that you don't necessarily get the big projects done. So on the writing side of things, I was sitting back listening to you all, actually. I was sitting here quite happily listening because I'm so used to just listening to writers talk, because I'm still at a very early stage. I'm still trying to kind of figure it out and build up momentum on the writing side of things. I mean, it all started for me a few years back when a few of us just talked about doing some kind of unofficial charity Doctor Who anthology. And I hadn't done any writing since I was at school. I hadn't done anything since pre-O level. And I think we had a conversation the other day, didn't we, Ian, about this, where there was an English teacher, and I wrote this Star Wars-based story that the teacher utterly ripped apart. Yeah. And being in the place my mind was at that time, that was kind of like, well, obviously I can't write. So it's never even occurred to me for well over 30 years to actually write something again. But being in amongst a lot of creative people and like-minded people where I felt comfortable, we talked about doing this Doctor Who anthology where I was initially just going to do some of the artwork. And then somebody said, well, why don't you have a go at writing a story as well? So I just did this David Tennant story and suddenly realised, oh yeah, I can do it. And then people were reading it and saying, oh, actually, it's okay. It's a lot better than some of the stuff we've read, and that for me was, was really, really nice to hear. So, and I even started thinking, well, I can draw, and surely I can't write as well, because no one can do, both those things. So, but then from there was another, like a horror anthology, and these are all unofficial things, self-published, like you've been talking about, and purely for charity. So, no money was changing hands, certainly not between anyone who made it. The money was all going to the charities. But it meant that it took some of the pressure off as well to just try something and for people to read, because I think probably everyone will agree that the greatest thing to come from doing your writing, apart from the personal fulfillment, is to have feedback from people who are actually reading your story. And it's kind of a little miracle in as much as for somebody to turn around and say, oh yeah, I really like your story, and you kind of like, what, it worked? And they go, well, yeah, it worked, and I really enjoyed it. And you're like, oh, okay. So this is how it works. So I'm very much at the point where I'm in the middle of writing a book, which is coming on in fits and starts. But as part of that, and the fact that my personal life has been very, very busy over the last few years, I've got young children, and we did a load of work to the house. So while I was working on the house, I was listening to an awful lot of podcasts and listening to an awful lot of writers talking, just to try and get in that mindset. I've realised that the writing is about creating habits, and it's about trying to do it as often as possible and keeping your head in the same space. And sometimes it is just a case of chipping away at it every now and again, rather than. I did try the thing of taking a week off work in order to do a load of writing, and it just didn't work because your head's got to be in the right space. Yeah. But what I have, for me, has worked is literally get up very early in the morning before anyone else wakes up, when your brain's fresh and before anything of real life can interfere with what you're trying to do, and just getting a bit done every day. And that's worked really well, literally a word count every morning. So I did, there's things like NaNoWriMo, which is the, what is it? Oh, yeah. I'm trying to remember what it stands for.
It's, you write a novel in a month, isn't it? It's 31 days.
Essentially, yeah. So and there is, and I've come across software that works. So I'm very much at the other end of what these guys are doing, where they're just writing books. So I'm still at the stage where I've yet to write a complete book. I've written quite a few short stories, which I've really, really enjoyed. And I've had people say to me, writing short stories is so much harder than writing a book. And I'm thinking completely the other way around, where I can churn out the short stories, but the idea of doing the whole book. But what I will say is that as time's gone on, and as I've listened to other people talk about the process and figuring out how I can physically do it, it feels more and more achievable. And there's an incredible community of writers out there, particularly on things like Twitter. The writing community on Twitter is so supportive. It's the absolute antithesis of a lot of what's going on social media. And a lot of, I don't know if Ian would agree with the authors he deals with, but my understanding is that a lot of authors, regardless of their status, are very generous with their time, and very generous with, people like Neil Gaiman on Twitter is incredibly generous with advice and with, encouraging people to write. So there's a whole real ball of energy as far as writing is concerned. There's an awful lot of people doing it, I realise, and you have to be incredibly lucky to lift yourself to the point where obviously you can give up your job or anything like that. That's something that every writer dreams of. But in general, I found it a really, really positive thing. And sorry, I'm going on a bit, but because I do a lot of different things, what I have found, my big admission is that I haven't actually read that many books. And that's, and I can imagine some writers going, what the, but what I have realised is that if you're a sponge and you're quite creative, as I'm sure the other lads feel the same, is that it doesn't matter what you're doing, because I watch an awful lot of movies and I listen to an awful lot of music, and I can get ideas from any of those things, and I can get influenced by any of those things. And I know earlier you were mentioning about whether there's certain writers that we read when we were younger and we feel has influenced our writing. I mean, I think everything influences your writing, and everything influences your creativity. And I think you've got to give yourself a break and just let yourself be yourself, because I think there's a lot of writers, and I certainly know there's a lot of musicians out there who will try and model their work on a particular writer or artist.
I imagine it must be very difficult to try and find your own voice, because there's that pressure, you want to become successful, and there's always that kind of whether it's done on purpose or whether it's a something that's there subconsciously, that particularly in genre stuff, I can imagine you could quite easily fall into the trap of,
I think you've got to
doing.
Yeah, you've got to take your foot off the pedal as far as that's concerned, because I've found myself thinking, I'm another one who loves Douglas Adams and loves Terry Pratchett, and I keep thinking I want to write funny, and I've thought to myself I want to write like Pratchett, and it just doesn't work. You've got to take your foot off the pedal and just trust that if you love those things and you've absorbed those things over the years, that they will come out naturally. So again, that's another lovely positive thing, is if someone turns around to you and say, "Oh yeah, I like your writing. It's a bit like this or it's a bit like that." I mean, I did a horror story and somebody turned around to me, and it was in a Lovecraft anthology, and I didn't know anything about Lovecraft. I think I played Call of Cthulhu when I was at college, and that was about as close as I got to it. But I kind of understood it, and I did the story that kind of touched on the things that he touches on, but in a way that was personal to me, because I didn't see the point in writing something which wasn't me. And then somebody turned around to me and said, "Oh, you write like M.R. James." And then I looked up M.R. James, and somebody went, and I thought to myself, wow, and it's a huge compliment. But that wouldn't have happened if I had focused on trying to write like someone else, or trying to write in a certain style. I just don't see the point. And I think because unless you're literally going to write like a workhorse, and you're going to write a particular style of book for a particular market and treat it like a job, then that's one thing. But I think if you're going to write from the heart, and I think that's what I've discovered from hearing everyone talk about it, is you've got to write from your heart. Then that's the only way to go, really, and that's the only way you're going to write your best work, is writing from the heart and being personal and not trying to be anything other than yourself. And
you find that it feels less like work because you've taken on that way of producing the book. If you're trying to work to a formula, I can imagine it could get quite sort of...
Yeah, I mean, that's the brilliant thing about the short stories, is that with something like that, you can be given a fairly tight, a brief.
A brief, yeah.
Yeah, because you can treat it like an experiment, and you're not going to be spending too much time on it. But obviously with a book, then you're devoting an awful lot of your own personal time to it. So, there's a big part of me, because I'm so busy with personal life and all the things I'm doing, then I don't particularly want to be wasting time on anything. So, but I mean, the surprising thing is the book I'm writing, I'm not going to say too much, because another thing is that you can lose impetus if you give too much away when you're talking about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But what has surprised me is, being such a sci-fi geek and fantasy and things like that, is the book I'm writing just isn't fantasy or anything like that. It does touch on my love of music, and it does and it is autobiographical. but it's kind of a fictionalized version. So there's lots of bits of everything going into it. So I'm quite, I know the shape of it and I know what I want it to be, and I'm quite a few chapters in, and I've literally, I'm sure the other guys will gasp, but I've got so far into it and realised actually I don't want this to be third person, I want it to be first person. So I'm rewriting everything I've written already.
Oh, crikey.
Oh, wow.
I know, but it's like, oh no, of course, that's what it should have been in the first place. So that's where I am with it. I'm nowhere near what these guys are doing, and I'm nowhere near getting this thing published. But
And I think knowing you like I do, once that idea has crept into your mind, you can't let it go. You're going to have to go back and do it.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I've actually signed on to a writing course, like a year-long writing course.
Oh, right, okay.
Which starts at the end of this month, and it's kind of goes in 3-month tranches of writing so many episodes, and then getting a critique, and then getting it back, and I think that'll probably work for me because it'll, I work well with deadlines, and I work well with those sort of pressures where I've got to get something done by a certain time. So I use a piece of software called Scrivener. I don't know whether the other guys do, which is just a brilliant writing.
Even I've heard of that.
Yeah,
so,
brilliant piece of writing software where I don't think there's a function that's missing from it. And one of the great things about it is you can do a daily word count on there. So you can treat it almost like running, where you've got to run a certain distance every day. Well, you write so many words every day. And then the brilliant thing about that, if you struggle with, I don't know, any kind of work ethic or anything like that, the brilliant thing about that is you do get a certain amount of personal feedback, because you look at this little target meter on the screen and you think, oh, I've done really well, and you can see it creeping up to the bar getting full up.
Does it give you like a little nudge? Does it? Because my running app, if I haven't run, it'll say, "You lazy bastard, you haven't run for 3 days. Stop eating pies and put your shoes on." Does Scrivener send you a little text alert to say, "You haven't written anything for 9 hours. Are you dead?"
Well, it kind of works in that respect, because you look back at the target, and it obviously adjusts. If you don't do enough words one day, then the amount you've got to write the next day gets bigger.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So you are always aware of it, and it's just brilliant. It's just brilliant, and as I say, I've just listened to lots and lots of people talk about their own experiences, and hearing, as you've been talking about the difference between self-publishing and then going to a publisher, and the importance of maybe getting an editor. I mean, that's something that neither of you have mentioned. I don't know whether you've ever used an editor or not, or whether you would employ one. About the importance of that and getting a fresh mind, and also things like beta readers, where you get somebody to read your book after the first draft to give you feedback. The importance that those people should never then read your next draft and feedback, because they're already aware of what was happening previously. So you've got to get fresh eyes each time. It's
quite scientific.
No, it's actually very scientific.
I mean, don't get me started on the story shape. I mean, the books I'm reading, people like John Yorke's Into the Woods and things like that. I've got to pick up Stephen King's book that everyone tells me I should read as well.
On writing.
But the trouble is I'm spending all this time reading these books and not writing. But it is fascinating to look at story shape and how, and certainly, going back to Doctor Who, watching Doctor Who, all of a sudden, it's like you're looking under the hood. You can see how it's all working, which is fascinating in its own right. But equally, sometimes you stop watching something and enjoying it, and you're analysing it while you're watching it. It's quite a big thing, really.
Yeah, I've used editors in the past in the form of proofreaders. Just people who essentially will tell me what doesn't work and what to fix. But it's interesting what you said about, you've got different fingers in different creative pies by the sounds of it, Simon. And I have to admit, about this time last year, I realised I was burning myself out with the amount of things I was doing. I was DJing on local radio once a week, and I was writing Captain Random and the Eater of Souls, the second Captain Random book, which is available on the 1st of October. And I then... and thank you very much. And I was also not just on the Diddly Dum podcast, but I was doing my own podcast, the James Bond Podcasters Royale show. So, and it was all just becoming a bit too much. And I had to think to myself, because this year's been a bit of a landmark year for me. I've had a big birthday, and I've also got married too. And I thought,
congratulations!
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, I started thinking to myself, well, I am going to have less time to do these things. So what really matters to me, and the one thing that stood out, and the one thing that gave me the most pleasure and joy, was writing. It was, it was getting the feedback from my books. It was creating my characters. It was plotting the story. It was just everything to do with it was the thing that gave me the most pleasure. So I really actually I had to take back quite a lot of what I've been doing outside of work, to the point now that I'm only, we record Diddly Dum once or twice a month, and then apart from writing, and I suppose, like I said, I've been writing a book a year, but that's quite stretched out. So it's now at a pace where I feel like I've now got the energy and I've got the time to dedicate to my writing in a way that I don't think I have had before, and I've really seen the benefits from that. I've written.
I was going to say, it can't help if you're feeling like you're really stretching yourself so thin that it's got to have an impact on what you're trying to create.
Definitely so. Yeah, and I did finish. I finished a horror novella this year, and I've never written horror before, but I just had this idea for the last 15 years, I reckon. I just had to get it down, and I thought, well, with the wedding coming up, I'm not sure whether I could invest that time, even emotionally, into writing a full novel this year. So let's try something with fewer words and maybe a shorter story,
or a poem.
Or a poem. It could have, or possibly, or possibly a haiku. A bit of flash fiction. Yeah. The Morleys were dead to begin with. That's it. Plagiarizing Dickens. No, so I've already seen the benefits, and I just I love the process. I started a writers group at work, because I work for the University of Cambridge, and we have writers in abundance, all at different stages. We have writers who are published, writers who are self-published, writers who are thinking about writing their first book, writers who write flash fiction, writers who write short stories. Just everyone's invited, and I've found them a good sort of sounding off board, and we all give each other little samples of what we've been working on recently, and it's a really good place, I find, to sort of hone your ideas. And there may be someone there who's stronger on horror than they are on science fiction, or someone there who's better on biography, perhaps. And it's just there's different strengths in different departments.
You seem very unafraid of switching up the genres, because you've done young adult fiction, horror, factual.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you haven't tried yet that you fancy having a dabble with?
Well, erotic thrillers, I suppose, but that could always come. That could always come.
What about rom-com? Rom-com's extremely big, isn't it?
I have got, I've got a little book which has various scribblings over the years, and there are.
You got a little black book with your poems.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Pink Floyd reference there.
Got that one, mate. And I've got some synopsis ideas, and I've got some just for a whole range of different things. The way I look at it is that the only person who's going to stop me from writing for different genres is myself. And some things might work, some things might not.
Or the wife.
Or the one.
Yeah.
But it's. I think you only live once, and I want to get as much done and as much down as possible, and I want to explore as many different genres as I can, and some will work, some won't. But as long as you continue learning, and as long as you look at yourself and you think while you're working on a book that you think, yes, there's elements of this that are better than the last one. Either I've written this more more concisely, or I've learned more from the process, as it were. I mean, the way I look at my books, Mark, is that I'd like to think that each one is a stepping stone. I think the best book I will ever write is the last book I will ever write, and the worst book I will ever write is the first book I ever wrote. And that's my viewpoint.
That's probably true. I think that's generally the writer's bell curve that you go through in a career. Your first couple of books, fair enough. Books 3, 4, 5 are your kind of heyday, and then once you get past that and you're on the downward slopes, one thinks immediately of Martin Amis, and he's not written anything staggering for about 20 years. But yeah, you'd like to think that you can just keep getting better, but you've got to keep absorbing, and you've got to keep pushing yourself and trying the new genres. And I don't know, that's a very combative way of living, and that's a very pure artistic ethic that you've got to have. And for every writer that feels that way, there are plenty of others who are quite happy to say, I do what I do, why mess with it? And I've probably said this before on every podcast I've ever been on, but I was once listening to a talk from Jeffrey Deaver. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a big American thriller writer, and he was saying, there's no great artistic suffering and intensity and brooding genius in my work. I write entertainment. I write things that are going to amuse people and divert them while they're on their commute or while it's a rainy afternoon. And if they enjoy them and they throw them away, then my book has done its job. And that's a lovely kind of ego-free way of looking at it. It's so lovely that you can offset the number of really quite egomaniac authors who think that what they're doing is going to change the world, to people who are just quite genuine. People, I imagine Terence Dicks would have been among them, who said, look, I do what I do. I'm not going to, it's not rocket science, but it makes people happy. And I'd much rather make people happy than be any good.
Or preferably both.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a nice thing for me. Like I say, it's been a big experiment. I mean, one of the big surprises I had as well was when I was given the opportunity to try to write an audio script, and for a company called Sounds of Thunder, which was being run by a friend of mine. And didn't I just threw one in there. They said yet another anthology. Put together like a horror thing. And I thought, I know what I'd do. I want to do a comedy comedy horror story because I love comedy horror. And I just tried it, and they liked it. And then they went away and recorded it. I knew nothing about it, and it came back. And Toby Haydock, like, reading my words.
Ah, wow!
Which was another huge surprise. But it's funny. Hayden's saying about you've got to limit what you do, and I've tried that before, but the trouble is I miss things.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
But it's a big experiment, and it may be that I end up not actually doing as much because I'm doing lots of little things. But I think as long as like you're talking about, as long as you keep experimenting and keep pushing yourself to see, what if I did this? Can I do this? And then find out you can or you can't. Then it's all well and good, and it's there's nothing but positivity. But one of the big things for me when I was my confidence was at its lowest was I heard an interview, and I can't remember who it was, can't remember, it could have been Joanne Harris or someone like that, was saying that if a lot of people say you're only a writer when you're published, but the bottom line is you're a writer if you write. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
And the person you're writing for essentially is yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's the same with a lot of creative things, isn't it? You know, you're creating something that you enjoy, because you've got to enjoy it yourself before you put it out to the world for other people to take in.
I do find that there is a little bit of sniffiness with regards to self-publishing. I once had someone who I went to school with got in contact, and she had an idea for a book about her son who had quite an incredible story. But the way that she phrased it to me in her message, she just wrote to me on Facebook and said, "Oh, I want to do a book, not a book like yours, a proper book."
Wow.
And at that point, I have to say, I just thought, well, that's someone who's never getting a reply. It's tricky. I suppose there is still a tiny bit of a step. I mean, yeah, Simon's right. If you write, you write. If you've got a book out, you've got a book out. If you've got a short story on a website somewhere or on a blog, you're still a writer. I mean, I suppose technically that opens it up to absolutely everybody, because we all write on social media every day, perhaps. But I mean, it shouldn't diminish what that person's trying to achieve, no matter whichever way they release it,
I suppose it's like it's saying if you write children's stories because there's only a few words, then you're not as much of a writer who writes something as thick as Lord of the Rings. It's, I mean, that's another, that's another can of worms, isn't it? Children's stories where you're reducing things down to its bare essentials.
Well,
this
is where something. Sorry, mate. This is where something like the Target books, just to link it back to Terrance Dicks and what we were saying earlier, are such a great source of inspiration. For me, with the Captain Random books, I think everything that I set out to do with a Captain Random book, a Target novelisation has done 150 times before. It's getting the basic story there. It's not talking down to an audience, but it's not talking up. It's just completely middle of the road in its pitch. It's stripping out all of the fluff out of a story as well. It's getting those action points in place. It's maybe giving you a slight window into the characters in a way that you haven't seen in the TV series. I can think, the Cave Monsters is a brilliant example for that. Mm-hmm. Among others, of course. And that's what I try and set out to do with my Captain Random books. They're very much for the kind of people who I suppose I would say used to read the Target books, because they're I wouldn't like to limit them to just young adults, but they're very much that's kind of what I'm setting out to do with them, is to make them as concise as the Target range was, I suppose. And I just think it's sometimes better as well. I mean, you look at something like the Harry Potter series, every single book was bigger than the last. Then to the picks, you wonder whether I have to take the week off work just to finish that book. It's and I started doing it with the second Captain Random book. I started thinking, right, well, the last one was 65,000, I think it was 65,000 words. And by the time I got to 40, I started thinking, oh no, I think the story's coming to an end. What am I going to do here? I've got to make another 25,000 words out of nowhere. What am I going? And I thought, no, you're being stupid. You're being stupid. Just write until the story is over. Don't set it out with a word count. Just keep writing until you think, no, if I go any further, I need to wrap this up now, because otherwise there's just going to be fluff here. I mean, Lord of the Rings is brilliant, but I mean, by the time you've got to your 5th chapter when they're camping, it just gets a bit a bit repetitive. You just think, I swear I read this 30 pages ago.
Let me just. So I tried to read Lord of the Rings as part of my literature degree about 100 years ago, and I think I gave up on it on about page 200 when all that had happened in 200 pages was a bunch of little people had walked into a wood and had a picnic. I just thought, Terrence Dicks would have done 2 whole books in the amount of time it's taken these guys to walk 50 yards and have a chicken leg. Do you know what I mean? But also, it's really interesting hearing what you were saying just there, because we obviously approach it from a completely different angle. So with the Winterhill stories, every story in my books in the Winterhill series, they're all 8,000 words long, or 8,001 or 8,005, but it's about 8,000 words, and that's my limit, because I want each adventure to be, like I always said, it was like the book equivalent of a TV box set, and you get really quite tight margins to operate in. So for me, it's always chopping the story down so that it fits in 8,000 words, and I can then kind of expand the fun dialogue stuff, or I can give them character moments or whatever. Whereas you're happy to just let the story be the story and be its own thing. I'm always much more kind of a carpenter by the numbers, following the instructions, kind of a writer. I come at it from a very production line kind of angle.
I see. Oh, okay. It's interesting though, because that there is. I mean, I suppose the thing that we're saying is that there is no correct way to do it. Really, it's just find something that works for you, and if you have a formula, stick to it. Unless you really do want to test yourself, there's just no right way of doing it. And if there was, we'd all be rich and famous.
So, Iain, seeing as Hayden's slipped in his little plug for his next book coming out,
did he? I didn't notice.
Give a plug to yours? Yeah, I did it very softly.
Oh, something about it's available on the 1st of October
in all good bookshops.
In all good bookshops. Which good bookshops?
All of them. No, Waterstones, Foyles, Barnes and Noble. Oh, crikey, what are the ones? I'm just trying to think of Booktopia. W.H. Smith I haven't been able to crack yet, which is an odd one.
No, you won't. You have to. Oh, I shouldn't say that. No, but you won't. Giving away trade secrets there. I'd have been sued up the wazoo. Oh, my Lord. Edit this. So let me give a little plug. So the 7th and final book in the Winterhill series came out, a month ago, 2 months ago. So all 7 of them are available on Amazon for anyone who likes episodic, female-driven science fiction with some all kinds of influences and all kinds of things. And some of it's very Douglas Adams, and some of it's very Terry Pratchett, and some of it isn't very good. No, it is what it is, and I'm very proud of it.
So Simon, it's probably a bit unfair because you're in the middle of writing your first sort of full-size novel, but have you got anything out there that people can have a look through to get an idea of your writing style?
Let me think. The next thing that's coming out that I'm quite proud of, and I don't know of a date, but it is fairly soon, is Altrix Books, Altrix, are putting out another charity anthology called Masterpieces. So it's an unofficial book all about, obviously, the master. And
wow.
I know, and I was given John Sims Master. Or I think I asked for it, actually. Yet again, I thought, actually, he's the most interesting for me. Because I didn't... Well, yeah, anyway. And I've timed it around the time he was in number 10.
Right.
And I'm particularly proud of it and particularly nervous of it because of how somewhat... what's the word? Where it's kind of predicted some of what's happened, and at the time of recording, what's happening in Parliament. And I was quite. Do you know what? I was really pleased. I shouldn't say this really, but I was really pleased in the Facebook group for the book. Is that when it came to my story and Paul Driscoll, the editor, put up a little mini synopsis of it and inferred that it was to do with politics. Someone came on and said, "Oh God, why do they always have to drag politics into Doctor Who?" And part of me thought, "Yes, my job is done. My job is done."
Oh, can you? Obviously, I could just listen to this when it's released. But while I've got you on the line, it's called Masterpieces. You say?
Yeah, Masterpieces from Ultrix Books. Altrix. I think it's probably just going to be an ebook. I think. I don't know, because I know they do hard copies, but it may be that because it's unofficial and because it's for charity that it can't go through the usual routes. But
yeah, sure.
But yeah, no, very proud of that, and I think it's quite funny. I will
absolutely look out for that. It sounds brilliant.
Cool, thank you.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to take a commercial break now, and when we come back, we're going to be getting some recommendations from the guys for some things that you might want to check out.
I don't suppose you have a copy of Fly Fishing by J.R. Hartley. It is rather old.
I'm sorry.
It's by J.R. Hartley.
No luck, Dad. Never mind. There's still a few more to try.
Good old yellow pages. We don't just help with the nasty things in life, like a blocked drain. We're there for the nice things, too.
You do? Oh, that's wonderful. Can you keep it for me? My name, oh yes, it's J.R. Hartley.
And welcome back. So we've reached the point in the show where we're going to get some recommendations from our guests. So I am going to start with Hayden. What would you like to recommend for our listeners?
I suppose we're not allowed to recommend our own work, are we?
Well, I'm sure you could, drop it into the conversation.
No, I'm not going to, because that just looks really big-headed of myself. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to recommend. I'm going to recommend a book, actually, and it's one that I read a couple of months ago, but it has stayed with me, and that's Band of Brothers.
Ah, yes,
by Stephen Moore. It was. I mean, I obviously watched the HBO series back in the day, the Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. Yeah. Brilliant telly miniseries, which was all about Easy Company coming over from America, setting up camp in Oldbourne, which as Doctor Who fans should all be well aware of, and then obviously heading off over into eventually. I think they would. God, this is terrible. Sorry, it's late and my brain has turned complete mush. But they were the first. Easy Company were the first platoon to infiltrate the Eagle's Nest, and it's a wonderful, wonderful book. I mean, the war is the backdrop.
Yeah, essentially,
it's more about comradeship. It's about just the human race, I suppose. As a whole, I guess, during a very testing time, and just what desperate times can drive people on to do, I suppose. So yeah, it's a fantastic book. It's I think it's on the 5th revision now, and as we were talking about earlier, I did find spelling mistakes in there, so I'll whisper that. But there we go. It's it's a fantastic book, and it was something a little different for myself. And just glorious. So Band of Brothers.
Excellent. And Simon, what have you got for us?
This is probably something that a lot of people would have looked at anyway, but I've just come to the end of watching the brand new Netflix Dark Crystal series, Age of Resistance. And the main reason I'm recommending it, I mean, obviously for anyone who loved the original film, I can kind of...
I don't think they're going to be disappointed, are they?
I don't think so. If they are, I don't know. I think you'd have to be fairly cold-hearted and fairly stuck in your ways to have a problem with it. All I want to enthuse about is the fact that I think, in a funny way, with everything that's going on in the world, it can seem like a pretty dark place. But for a project like this, and it may be that we're in a period of time before the nasty fingers of capitalism, did I say that? Maybe not. Get in there and really start spoiling things and start dictating what a company like Netflix chucks its money at. I just think is amazing, because you get to the end of the 10 episodes and then there's a really good hour and 20 minutes making of documentary as well.
Ah, really?
Yeah, it's really great. And you realise that people really high up in Netflix, as well as obviously the Henson family and lots of other people involved, really wanted to make this programme because they loved the film. And it goes through the process of the fact that they were initially going to do like an animated series, like a CGI, your typical CGI animated series. And they realised, what, this isn't working. And then they started using puppet Skeksis. They got the original puppet Skeksis and tried them with CGI Gelflings, tried the two together. No, it didn't work. And then they basically turned around and said, you know what, we're going to have to do this as they did it back then. And they have. And aside from a little bit of CGI on certain little touches, like certain little facial tweaks, and the Skeksis tongues are fascinating. As their mouths are moving, their tongues are moving as they would do if they were talking. Quite incredible. The level of detail, the world building is up to the same level, if not beyond what the original film did. And it certainly kept my interest.
There's something tangible about those puppets, isn't there? It's just, I don't know, they're puppets, but it feels more real than watching a CGI character.
Yeah, and you know what? It's really dark. It's really dark to the point where I've got two young girls, and one of them, the older one who's 10, was watching the original film, and her and her cousin were taking the mickey out of it as they were watching it, because I think it was all a bit silly with the puppets and what have you. But I think she'll get to a certain age and the penny will drop. But equally, I'm kind of glad, because as the series goes on, just like the Star Wars prequels, this is a prequel towards the end film, and we all know where the original film was in a really dark place when it started. Yeah. This is getting towards that. So there's some pretty bad things happen. But I don't think I could recommend it more. If I could change one thing, I'd say there should be more of the Trevor Jones music in it. But that does give an appearance at a really good point. So maybe less is more with that one. So yeah, thoroughly recommend that.
Excellent. And Ian, what have you got?
DVD/streaming TV choice. I'm still incredibly blown away by, that's an unfortunate expression, by Chernobyl. That was the HBO Sky Atlantic series. Everything they say about it on IMDb and all these other sites is true. It is the best thing that has ever happened to television, ever. Full stop. If I could mention one book while we're on the subject of writerly things, there's a book published on the 19th of September called I Love the Bones of You, which is the autobiography of Christopher Eccleston. I say autobiography. It's basically it's the story of his father and their relationship, and his father and his mental decline. But obviously, at times, Eccleston also talks about his own career as an actor. And there's one particular chapter which, you're going to love it, guys.
Excellent. When's that out, did you say?
That's out the 19th of September.
Oh, not long ago.
I'm just going to say, Ian, have you ever listened to the Script Notes podcast?
No, I have not.
It is presented by two men, and one of them is the guy who wrote Chernobyl.
Oh, now.
Is it Craig?
Craig someone? Craig. But I don't know. If my eyesight was slightly better, I'd be able to read it because I can see the cover of the Chernobyl DVD from where I'm slouched on the bed. No, I'm never going to read that with my ancient 43-year-old eyes.
There's one particular episode he presents on his own. It's literally, like a monologue, really, and he's talking about the essentially story and how to make your story work. And I think it's about 45 minutes long or something like that. And it's absolute gold dust. So look up the Script Notes podcast.
I'm going to download that right now. Script Notes, you said.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Okay.
And through most of it, they interview, script writers from Hollywood, really, really top level people. Some amazing. There's a really good episode with Charlie Brooker as well, where he's talking about Black Mirror. That's gold dust as well.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to chuck a couple out there. The first one I think Simon has come across is it's on Netflix. It started out on YouTube, and it's a kids show called Storybots.
Ah, yes, it's cool.
Okay.
It is brilliant. So our son is 5 now, coming on. He'll be 6 in December. So I think he's sort of a prime age for it, really. So it's you could sort of dumb it down and say it's like a sort of slightly cutesy version of Do You Know, which is another favourite in our house, mainly because Maddie Moat, that presents it on CBeebies, is not too shabby to look at. But Storybots, it starts off, it's a very funny show. It's animated. You'll get it's basically these little robots. They live inside a computer. A child will come up with a question, so it could be how many kinds of animals are there, or how does rain work, or where do French fries come from, and their boss is quite highly strung. Would you say, Simon?
Oh yeah, that's one way of describing them.
So he will instruct them to go off and find out the answer. So they go off and they look into it, and it's very funny. It's very sweet, and there's lots of little songs thrown in as well. It's just a real delight to watch. They're on the 3rd series now on Netflix, and it's a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed that. And on a slightly more serious note, I have been devouring Brexit Cast, which is a BBC podcast all about our favourite topic that pretty much everyone in Britain is talking about. And I just find it quite interesting. It's reassuring in a way, because you're hearing BBC reporters talking about the latest developments, and it kind of humanises it a bit, because otherwise, if you're just watching the news all the time, it could get quite depressing. But there's a lot of humour in there. But the main presenters do a great job of getting the facts across, trying to they try to be quite even with the way that they present it. But it's become something I have to listen to straight away as soon as a new one drops, particularly as new developments seem to happen. So Brexit Cast, if that's your kind of thing, I would certainly recommend. So before you guys go, firstly, thanks very much for coming on and chatting. Would you like to give a plug to your various things you've got going on? Simon, for starters, you've got your podcast that you're doing and a radio show to boot as well. So do you want to give them a quick plug?
Oh, brilliant. Okay, I'll be very quick. Strangers in Space podcast, which is what was the Blue Box podcast that used to do with Mark. So yeah, Strangers in Space. I've also got a couple of radio shows which also go out on Mixcloud. One called Two Knobs and an Oscillator, which is all electronic music from all various different areas and what have you. And the other one is Robots on the Radar, which is a bit more freeform and a bit more indie with a bit of electronic stuff. So I do those kind of once a month, each of those. And they're both on Phonic FM. So you can look up Phonic FM and you can get a live link to that. But also those shows are on Mixcloud if you search for them.
Cool. And Hayden, obviously, we probably know you best from Diddly Dum.
Diddly Dum, yes, yeah. I'm in my 4th year with Diddly Dum,
Wow.
the Doctor Who podcast, the Diddly Dum podcast with Doc Whom, myself, and Mark John. Yeah, it's still going strong. We've got our top 5 William Hartnell episodes coming up soon.
Yeah, looking forward to that one.
Yeah, so do get in contact with us at diddly_dum on Twitter if you'd like to vote for your top 5 Billy Hartnell stories. My books got Child Out of Time, growing up with Doctor Who during the Wilderness Years. The 2 Captain Random books that have been written and released so far: Captain Random versus the Sandman, and Captain Random and the Eater of Souls. My crime thriller book, The Man in the Corner. They're all available on Amazon and, like I said earlier, from all good bookshops too.
Excellent. And Ian, have you got any? You have cut down on your podcasting lately, which disappoints me greatly.
Well, I had to. I stopped doing 5-minute fiction because
more.
I was trying to read a book a week and do a podcast about it and have a full-time job and run 30 kilometers a week and try and write. And like Hayden was saying, it's just too much. So I've kind of given up on pretty much everything now. The 7 Winter Hill books are available. I might write something else one day. You don't know. Right now, I'm just eating crisps and getting fat.
Excellent. Well, before we go, I will just quickly give a mention. By the time this episode goes out, I will have been on the Proctor Who podcast. They have an offshoot called Take Your Seats, which is presented by John Aitken and Suki Kark. And they focus on sci-fi movies, and we're going to be looking at Ridley Scott's Alien. So head over there to their feed and check that out. So hopefully that should be a good one. So thank you once again, guys. It's been a real pleasure having you all on. And
thank you for having us.
Wow, the pleasure was all mine. And we'll speak again soon.
Take care.
Thanks.